Hello, everyone. Depending on where in the world you're joining us from today, a very warm good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you all. I'm Vinika Rao, and I'm joining you from INSEAD, our campus here in Asia, in Singapore. I'm the Executive Director of the INSEAD Emerging Markets Institute and our Gender Initiative, as well as the Director in Asia for the Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society. It's a real pleasure to join you on behalf of a business school that is deeply committed to the idea of business as a force for good for people and for our planet. It's really nice to be here for this very important session on climate budget as a part of ChangeNOW 2021, the summit. Now, as the ramifications of COVID-19 on all aspects of lives and livelihoods continue to manifest across the globe, governments, organizations, and individuals like ourselves are continuing to struggle to safeguard our lives and livelihoods. But even as we do that, one silver lining of this crisis has been that it has created a sort of consciousness of our shared vulnerability as human beings to the perils of a pandemic and of climate change. And so this is a good time to be having this conversation. Now, the European Union and the US under Biden have promised to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. China has made the same promise for 2060. But even as we hold our collective breaths and cross our fingers and toes in anticipation of that important transition happening, what are some of the steps that need to be taken at all levels, at our individual levels, at organizational levels, at city levels, at national levels, in order to be able to measure, to regulate, and to reduce carbon emissions? These are some of the points that we will be discussing in this session on climate budget. And we're fortunate to have with us some excellent speakers, experts, who will be sharing their views on this important topic. In terms of the agenda flow, we will start with a keynote session. We'll continue with a panel discussion with two distinguished panelists, and finally wrap up with a fireside chat with the European Investment Bank. I look forward to having this session with you all today. Okay, I was told there's going to be a little jingle that will play now, so I'm waiting if that's going to happen. Otherwise, I'll introduce our first speaker. All right, looks like we can go straight into introducing Chad, our keynote speaker for today. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce you to Mr. Chad Frischmann. He's the Senior Director, Drawdown Solutions at Project Drawdown. Chad is also co-author, lead researcher, and principal architect of the methodology and models behind the New York Times bestseller, Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Chad and his team have designed integrated global models to assess the world's most effective climate solutions and determine if, when, and how the world can reach drawdown, which they define as the point in time when the concentration of atmospheric greenhouse emissions begins to decline on a year-to-year basis. I'm sure we all agree that that's something we're very, very interested in finding out more about. So Chad, over to you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today and talk to so many change makers from around the world. Talk about real climate solutions that exist today, actions that we can all take to start us on the pathway to achieving drawdown and to creating a regenerative future for people and planet. Great. So as a starting point, what is drawdown? As we just heard, drawdown is that point in time when atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases begin to decline on a year-to-year basis. It's that point when we take out more of those heat-trapping gases than we put into Earth's atmosphere. And the proposition is really pretty simple. When we can change those concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, or fluorinated gases, we can essentially stop global warming and begin the long process of reversing it. And indeed, this is a prerequisite. Achieving drawdown, that point, is a prerequisite to solving the climate emergency that we're facing today and future generations to come, and is a prerequisite to starting us out on that pathway to achieving a regenerative future for people and planet. But first, how do we get there? We have to understand at the starting point what are the sources of those emissions? Where are they coming from so that we can identify the solutions to reduce those sources to zero? Then we have to understand, once the emissions are in the atmosphere, what are those natural or engineered sinks that can pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere safely so that we can find the solutions to enhance those sinks? And third, how do we improve society? How do we fundamentally look at the way we do business as a society and economy so that when we're implementing solutions, we do so from a human rights-based approach that has justice, equity, and inclusion at its core? We need to think about how we can fundamentally change the system from one that is inherently exploitative and extractive to a new normal that is by nature restorative and regenerative because it is inherently linked to nature itself. This is how we get on the pathway towards a regenerative future for people and planet. So where are all these emissions coming from? What are the sources of emissions? Well, they come from just about everything we do as a human species. From the electricity that's generated by coal, oil, or gas-fired plants when we turn on our lights, or the gas that's burned when we heat our homes, or the petrol that's burned in internal combustion engines or jet fuel on airplanes as we move around the world from point A to point B, to the smokestacks that are churning out emissions from all the stuff that we use every day and too often waste on a daily basis, to the food that we consume itself, and in how we produce that food and use the land. These are all sources of emissions. All the activities we do as a species produce emissions that enter the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, methane, fluorinated gases, and nitrous oxide. The good thing is that we have natural sinks that pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere every day through a process we all know from secondary school. It's the magic, the miracle of photosynthesis that converts carbon dioxide into plant soil organic matter and plant biomass in our land and ocean sinks. This happens every year. Unfortunately, we put out so much emissions, so many, from all of those human activities, that about 59% of all the emissions that we put in the atmosphere stay there. And that's in part because our land and ocean ecosystems have limited capacity to pull that carbon dioxide out. And sadly, we are degrading those ecosystems at an alarming rate. So how do we stop emissions? How do we turn off the sources of emissions? How do you get them to zero, not net zero, but zero emissions? And how do we enhance the sinks so that we can pull more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and really enhance the capacity of our natural ecosystems to be sinks to achieve that point in drawdown? Well, this can happen through one of three mechanisms. First is if we can reduce the amount of consumption, all the things that we consume, all those areas of human activity, if we can reduce the amount of electricity we generate, the amount of stuff that we produce, the amount of food we overconsume through technological efficiencies and through behavior change. If we replace the technologies and practices that are contributing to the problem with solutions that are part of the alternatives that are part of the solution. And if we restore carbon to useful forms through natural sinks by enhancing soil productivity and restoring carbon to the land, but we also can see the benefit of engineered sinks in the future when they become economically and technologically viable. Through a combination of one or more of these three mechanisms, drawdown becomes possible. Now, I lead a team of researchers, 100 researchers from all over the world representing every discipline you can imagine. Over the last 7 years, we have evaluated and assessed, we have mapped, modeled, and described existing technologies and practices that when taken together as a system of solutions can achieve drawdown by addressing all of these areas of human activity and reduce those sources, enhance those things, and improve society in ways that fundamentally have at its core justice, equity, and inclusion at its heart, but also address all of these areas that we can actually shift that system to a regenerative way of doing business and address the climate emergency that we're in, because all of these have those impact of reducing emissions reducing sources, enhancing sinks, and improving society. And it's through this framework of understanding what are the existing technologies and practices that can get us there that allow us to achieve drawdown. So it's not a technology problem. We know what to do. We have the technologies and practices that are readily available. It's a matter of will to move farther and faster than we thought possible. But let's take a look at what some of these solutions are. Now, I can't list all 82 of the solutions that we've evaluated on one slide, so I've picked about 25 of those most substantive technologies and practices that really cover the range of human activity. And you see this slide here is just a listing of those top 25 in terms of the most substantive solutions in terms of the amount of reduced CO2 equivalent, carbon dioxide equivalent, over a 30-year period from 2020 to 2050. To the right of that slide, you'll see those two numbers. That represents two different scenarios, two levels of ambition in order for that we, as a globe, as a society, that we can achieve if we implement these technologies and practices to achieve our goals, our climate targets, aligned with a 2 degrees Celsius warming target or a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming target. And this is the cumulative impact of those solutions over that period of time. Now, the first thing I think to really notice is the importance of renewable electricity systems. And of course, these are a necessary set of solutions. And it makes sense because electricity generation accounts for 25% of global greenhouse gases in total. So we see as part of these top 25 solutions or so, we see wind and solar. But there are many other solutions as part of a diversified portfolio of renewable electricity systems, including geothermal, biomass energy, electricity generation, micro-scale wind or microgrids, distributed electricity systems. All of these taken as a system allow us to achieve that 100% clean renewable grid, which is absolutely essential, because this 100% clean renewable grid, or as close as we can get to that, is the driver, as a core for the rest of the system, because it's such an important sector, contributing so much of the global greenhouse gases, but also affects so many other areas, so many other sectors that draw upon energy consumption. And that's where we think about the rest of the 75% of emissions. Where are they coming from? They come from other areas like buildings, our built environment, industry, transportation, which consume energy both from the grid as well as from on-site combustion of fossil fuels. So when we're implementing a clean renewable grid, this actually has an additional effect on our other sectors by reducing the energy consumption of those other sectors. And as we can see here, we see industry, buildings, transportation, all represented in these top solutions. And this is really important to think about, not only making improvements on efficiency of these solutions like LED lighting or insulation, which reduce the energy demand in buildings, for example, but also replacing. So this is also how we can see alternatives to technologies that are part of the problem. Things like refrigerants that are produced, we produce hydrofluorocarbons in order to use in our air conditioning and our refrigerators across the world ubiquitously to keep our food cool, fresh, and frozen, to ensure that our homes are properly cool in times of heat and so on throughout the year. So we use hydrofluorocarbons, which are hundreds to thousands of times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And in these existing equipment, they leak over time. And there are solutions readily available to manage that leakage and destroy those hydrofluorocarbons at the end of life. Or we can also think about producing new alternative refrigerants, natural alternatives that already exist today to replace those really polluting super pollutants, hydrofluorocarbons, from entering the atmosphere to start with. So if we think about not only these reducing consumption by improving efficiency, technological efficiencies, but also alternatives, switching out to better, more solutions that do not pollute the environment and do not pollute our atmosphere. These are the solutions that are readily available. Our food systems themselves, this is one of the big exciting things about the research we've done at Project Drawdown, is the importance of the decisions that we make every day about what we consume, what we purchase, and how we consume that food. reducing our food waste, our plant-rich diets. These are some of the top solutions because they touch upon everything in the system. If we just think about every crust of bread, every drop of oil, we think as it goes through the supply chain from production, how we produce that food through industrial agricultural methods is a net emitter of carbon dioxide. So we have solutions that are regenerative in nature that can restore carbon to the land and produce greater yield and benefit farmers and benefit smallholders and large farming operations alike and bring carbon back to the land. So we have solutions at the agricultural production. But if we think across the supply chain, we through harvesting and processing, packaging, think about all of that glass, tin, plastic, cardboard that we produce, churning out emissions in order to put our food into, and then putting them on trucks, on trains, boats, ships, and sadly, too often planes for luxury commodities to travel all over the world, burning fossil fuels and tailpipes and through jet fuel all across the world in order to get our refrigerated containers using hydrofluorocarbons to our markets, which overstock food for presumed consumer demand. And then sadly, consumers, when they purchase so much food, so much of it gets wasted at the end of the supply chain where it decomposes and emits methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So we can really see the importance of the food system as a whole from every point of that supply chain. And so the decisions that we make about how much food we consume, how much we can reduce that waste, and the choices we make in how we produce that food and what we're purchasing are perhaps some of the most important decisions every individual can make every day to stopping global warming. And our food systems also have a direct impact on our land systems because the principal driver of degradation and deforestation of our land system, the terrestrial systems, is our food systems themselves. So by addressing our food systems, we also can think about how to avoid that land conversion. But we should avoid land conversion and protect our ecosystems as they exist today because this is how drawdown happens every year, by converting carbon dioxide into plants' biomass and through soil organic carbon. So these are our natural sinks that can pull carbon out. So by protecting what is already there, we can not only avoid turning that great storehouse of carbon into emissions by protecting it, but that we can also enhance sequestration, enhance the capacity of our ecosystems to continue to pull carbon every year, but also restoring our forests and restoring peatlands and even our ocean ecosystems by protecting and restoration. This enhances our natural sinks and allows drawdown to happen. But it's through the combination of these land and ocean, our land and food solutions taken together represent the most impactful set of solutions that are available to us, readily available to today, to solve our climate emergency. And this is because these are the sectors in which we can not only avoid emissions by reducing the sources, but also enhancing the sinks as well. So it's a double effect of having both reduction of sources and improving and enhancing sinks. So taking this fundamentally changes traditional thinking on climate action, which is so focused traditionally on energy systems. But we need to see this as a holistic, comprehensive approach that addresses energy systems, our natural environment, because they are interlinked. And this is no more clearly represented when we think about health and education and its effect on population. Because health and education, by improving access to voluntary reproductive health care, contraception, and the freedom to choose your own life trajectory, to have the dignity of your own choice of your own body, and to choose when, how, and if you raise a family through the reproductive health care, and by enhancing universal access to quality education for boys and girls, has the effect of changing future population growth, reducing expected growth to more sustainable levels for the planet, and that has an effect on the rest of the entire system by reducing that demand for energy, for electricity generation, for building space, for food systems, for everything else. All the stuff that we consume as a species is reduced by having a more sustainable population in the future by reducing the expected population growth through enhancing the basic human right to health and education for everybody on the planet. And this is readily available and easy, relatively easy to do. So these is such an important set of solutions that represent the entirety of it, of the system. And we have to remember that when we also think about health and education, this improves capacity of individuals to make choices about their own life trajectories, their own ways of living, and when climate education and education about the connection of people and planet are embedded in that quality of education, we can enhance the implementation of all the other solutions in the system itself. So I also want to talk a little bit about the difference. So some of you may be thinking, well, how much is this all going to actually cost? I mean, we can see that we can achieve drawdown through that system of solutions. Those 25, addressing all those areas of human activity, the 25 get us partially there, but we need all 82 solutions to get us there. But how much is it going to actually cost to do that? Well, we've done the financial analysis, and we figured out that compared to what we would have to do anyway, we can invest up to $20 to $30 trillion over a 30-year period to achieve that system of solutions. And it may seem like a lot, but it's relatively a drop in the bucket if we consider global GDP over that same time period is over $86 trillion a year. So $30 trillion over a 30-year period is not that much an additional investment. But the kicker is the operational savings is from $90 to $145 trillion, again, compared to what we would have to do anyway. So in terms of just our thinking about our financial return, it's a no-brainer, right? This is a win-win solution where we can set of solutions where we can not only solve the climate emergency, but we do so that is going to enhance our system through a series of cascading benefits to human and planetary well-being and be financially viable. So it's important to remember this. So it's not a technology issue. It's not a economic or a financial issue. We have the technologies readily available. It's a matter of will, and it's a matter of really changing the way we think about how we approach climate action and how we approach the connection to people and planet. And I think we've been operating on this paradigm of problem fixing, trying to fix the problems of the past, and instigated by this overwhelming drive for fear, and in an environment of conflict and competition. And it's this sort of cauldron of problem, fear, and conflict that I think actually stymies, prevents us from moving forward and taking our steps towards that pathway to the future that we actually want. A future that is really based on solutions, the possibility of what those solutions can achieve, and working together in an environment of collaboration, linking arms, and envisioning a future where we're not driven by competition, but we're driven by collaborating for the benefit of all people, for the well-being of people and planet, by utilizing that solutions-oriented approach and seeing what's the possibility to achieve these opportunities. That's the mixture, solutions, possibility, and collaboration to create opportunities for the future that we actually want. And we need to name what that future is. We need to name that marker on the horizon, that place where we want to go as we start to take our steps down that pathway. Because if we don't name it, we don't know where we're going. So that's a starting point. How do we create that regenerative future? Name the goal that goes beyond our climate targets and start taking our steps down in that pathway to achieving our goals. And when we do that, drawdown becomes possible. We understand the existing set of technologies, the system of solutions that can get us there. We understand the financial implications that aren't going to prevent us, aren't going to be a barrier for us to make movement forward. And then we change the way we talk about it, the way we actually imagine that future. Drawdown becomes possible. And the future we want becomes possible. But only when we reimagine existing systems, changing the way we think about them, seeing everything as a global system of systems, interconnected, because they are interconnected from the local to the regional to the global to the regional to the local, vice and back and forth. And all of these sectors are interacting through interaction effects, stock and flow, and system dynamics, because we're essentially operating in that global system of systems. So we need to change the way we do business to see the world and see the future that we want as a more organic, as an ecosystem of solutions, operating as paralleling, mirroring life itself. right? So we can create a more resilient, adaptable, and dynamic system where solutions are addressing the challenges that we have today, but doing it from a forward-thinking, forward-visioning approach where we can change and move the types of solutions that are going to get us to achieving our targets. Like the 2 degrees Celsius warming target, we have the solutions that are available. Here are the solutions and their contributions as a whole to achieving drawdown, to achieving the 2 degrees Celsius warming target. We have the solutions available, and they, as you can see, the top 25 or so are really, really important. But we need all of them. We need all 82 solutions to get us to this target. The top 10, top 20, top 30 aren't going to get us there. We need all of them. There are no silver bullets. There are no subset of solutions that are going to get us there. And frankly, we need to do it all in parallel because these are an integrated system. And our results are a product of that integrated effect of the system as a whole as we adopt all of these solutions together. If we're more ambitious, if we're even ambitious with the implementation of different solutions, we really set ourselves the target of the urgency that we need to achieve to prevent the climate disaster, to solve the climate emergency. We can achieve our 1.5 degree Celsius targets. The solutions are going to change in terms of the overall contribution, and that's to be expected. And we should think about how new solutions are going to come online into this system of solutions, and they're going to have different effects across the system. So these are always going to be dynamic, and that's a good thing. We have to think about the dynamic nature of solutions to solve our goals. The great thing is that we want this system of solutions whether or not global warming was even a problem, because they all have cascading benefits to human and planetary well-being. We can go beyond our climate targets and think about how this system of solutions can actually achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We've mapped all of the existing solutions to achieve drawdown to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The key to implementing all of the solutions is partnerships. Connecting our partners, linking arms, collaboration from public to private sector to individual to communities. How we actually implement solutions requires that level of engagement, participation, and partnership. And then when we implement these solutions, they have these cascading benefits that benefit people and planet in ways that are not just about climate, that are about human well-being, about health, about poverty reduction, and so on, about improving our ecosystem, about protecting and restoring biodiversity, etc. It's how we do this, how we implement the solutions themselves with justice, equity, and inclusion at its heart. Because if we remember that these are opportunities to create the future that we want, then we can see this as not just addressing climate, but also addressing the many other global challenges that we're facing. We could see these as global solutions to climate, to the SDGs, and in fact, going beyond that, to building a regenerative future, going beyond even sustainability, which is limited in its capacity to address our challenges as a species, but to move to a regenerative system of abundance, where we're creating abundance for all people without the exploitation and extraction of a system that is limited in our resources, but building and thinking and envisioning how people and planet are interconnected, and a future regenerative society and economy is the future that we choose, because we have the opportunity to do that today. We need to do it today because the climate emergency is pressing. The urgency requires us to think in this way, but we can come together as a new generation, the regeneration, where we link arms, because the decisions that we make today have more impact than perhaps any other time in human history, because they affect us right now, our own livelihoods, our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations to come. So we need to be thinking about how we link arms together across generations, across sectors, and really reframe this as a collaborative approach to collective action, working together, because we are the regeneration to work together to create that future that we actually want. And you all here today, the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people around the world, are change makers who have the opportunity to come together as part of the one generation, the regeneration coming together to make to solve the climate emergency, to create this system of solutions to achieve drawdown, and to create the first steps on the pathway towards a regenerative future. I'd like to thank you for your time. and I look forward to seeing the rest of the panel discussions.
Thank you, Chad, for that wonderfully comprehensive presentation. I think that the solutions you presented that are available to us to solve our climate challenges and move towards, and I quote from what you said earlier, the new normal that is inherently restorative for the planet. What a wonderful line, and let's hope that we can really move towards that. Now, this keynote from Chad provides a wonderful starting point for the panel discussion that we want to have now, where we will discuss some of the points that Chad raised and some new and important issues that we want to talk about. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our panelists for the panel discussion. We have an apology from Emily Alberola, who's the Director of Research and Innovation at EcoAct. She really wanted to be with us today, but unfortunately there's been a health emergency in the family, so we wish her and the family all the best to recover from that issue. So I'm delighted now to introduce our panelists. We have with us Lubomila Jordanova. Lubomila is the founder and CEO of Plan A Earth, a Berlin-based startup developing an end-to-end platform enabling companies to measure, monitor, and reduce their environmental footprint and improve their ESG performance. Welcome, Lubomila. Thank you for making the time to be with us. And we also have with us, thank you. And we have with us also Felipe Singer. Felipe is someone, again, that does some amazing things. He's the managing director and co-founder of Leaders for Climate Action. He's an entrepreneur at heart. I think you started your first social business at the ripe old age of 18, Felipe, if I remember correctly. And this has been followed by another mobile commerce company that you sold in 2018. And of course, since the last few years, you've been busy building Leaders for Climate Action, which has become Europe's biggest climate initiative started by the digital industry. So thank you both so much for being with us today. Really excited to discuss some of the pointers that we talked about earlier in the introduction and through Chad's keynote. So just as we start off, I thought, it might be interesting to maybe just ask about the most basic question that everybody raises, which is that whether it's a small company, it's a startup, and especially if these are large organizations, complex international organizations, the challenge of actually, how do I start to measure my carbon footprint? And then, how do I make sure that I'm taking into account everything that I need to look into in order to be able to at least know what my measure is right now, and then before we can even go forward in terms of reduction. So if I can ask both of you to give your comments on that. Felipe, perhaps we start with you, if you like.
It's okay, or maybe even Lubomila is also part of our community, and she is the expert in really working on the measurement part. So I would love her to start, and then I'm adding very interesting community actions, but also reduction potentials that we are seeing. So Lubomila, if you want, the stage is yours.
Perfect.
Always good to see you, and always good to share stage with you. It's really a great pleasure to be here. I think this important question is one that is on the back of the minds of many corporates as well as smaller companies. And there's actually three things that you can do in order to be really comprehensive with your carbon accounting. First of all is to rely on science. The second of all is to find a reliable partner that can help you with complex carbon accounting. This is definitely more applicable to large corporates. And finally, it is to set up a dedicated team. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to hire a sustainability lead, or at least you need to find someone in your team that is interested in kind of developing the topic and engaging the employees as well as the third parties. We work with a lot of complex industries like automotive, e-mobility, fashion, and so on. And what we've learned with them is that the biggest challenge sits in scope 3. There's something called the GHG protocol, which I think for an audience like the one of ChangeNOW is something I don't need to explain. And within scope 3, what sits is essentially these third parties, these investments, these people that have sold you some goods and services. And this is where the truth about carbon accounting lies. Like if you take an automotive company, this is at 98% of its emissions. So what really it takes for you to have a precise calculation that really allows for continued tracking is to engage these third parties and get them to become part of your reduction strategy. So that's maybe like a little piece of 3 points that you can take as a company in moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, what I can definitely add, I mean, in our community, basically what always happens in the first step, even before the transformation starts, is that we need to get a commitment from the C-level that they will carry out the changes within 3 to 6 months. And on top, we need one person head of sustainability or someone who's operationally responsible for this. And to have the C-level and the operational person both in a boat enables to carry out the changes much faster. So I would say really bring all the stakeholder into it. And if you have a big board already, make sure that the investors are in it as well, and make sure that you don't pitch it as a problem that needs to be solved, but rather like opportunity in the future to be there. And I think, I mean, we started about 2 years to work on the topic, and in the past 2 years, I noticed that there's a change, and we need to continue to push this change towards kind of seeing this bright future, similar how Chat pointed it out before. If we maybe now like give a little focus of maybe like smaller to medium-sized companies, I think what is important is to start right away and not make a plan for a year and then slowly start, but really look into what are the low-hanging fruits that you can look at and tackle these things now, because the reduction potentials often are similar for many companies. If you look then at the supply chain, I agree with Lubomila, that gets much more complex.
Indeed, yes. Thank you. Yes. And, you know, you're so right. It's important to start now and not sort of, you know, try to get it perfect, because that's not going to happen or it'll take forever. So absolutely. Thank you for that. And Lubomila, you know, you talked very briefly about the role of science. I think you started to talk about how important it is to look at science. And I know that in your organization at Plan A, you've actually chosen an approach that relies strongly on science with the support of your team of in-house scientists. So maybe a little bit more, if you could elaborate on the role of science in building solutions around carbon reduction.
Absolutely, yeah. Science has actually allowed us to be driven by facts rather than by fact when it comes to climate change, and essentially embed this into the philosophy of the company itself. If you follow science, what you can see quite clearly is that what we need to be doing is carbon reduction. We need to be reducing between 29 and 32 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030 to maintain essentially the possibility of getting to 1.5 degree temperature increase only. And with this in mind, essentially, we have taken this reduction first approach where we've been developing our software, which is specifically focused on really allowing companies to see themselves, first of all, as an actor of change, where they calculate their emissions and really engage these third parties on full scope 1, 2, and 3, and then derive these net zero targets and then achieve these reduction kind of activities that they set themselves for. I'm really proud to actually be working with prominent scientists from all over the world. Actually, the person that is in charge of our reduction team has been the right-hand man of Germany on their decarbonization journey. So maybe this is just to show how seriously we take actually the importance of reduction and taking these actions and tangibly allow companies to reduce rather than simply offset or kind of compensate their existence in one way or another.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And, you know, Felipe, at any point, if you want to pipe in with some comments, please feel free to do so. You know, we want to make this a sort of a more casual conversation.
Maybe I can put the focus a bit to the digital industry and elaborate a little bit why we as Leaders for Climate Action focus so much on the digital industry. And the reason for that is that we believe that we have a huge opportunity as the digital industry. And this opportunity is to create the first ecosystem that runs completely climate neutral or climate positive, and at the same time brings about growing and healthy organizations. And we believe if we can achieve this as the digital industry, not in 2040 or 2050, but really in the next years, this can be a strong driver that also pushes politics to make stronger decision-making, but also other industries to follow this example. And therefore, I think the digital industry has a very important role here. And if we look at the potentials that also lay in the digital industry, I think I would kind of put it together into three main fields. I think, first of all, the potential is also always a challenge, because decarbonizing the digital industry, that's the potential and that's what we need to do. And I think the big homework that has to be done is really working on the data centers and the green hosting, because that is something that kind of digital companies still try to hide, including the big ones. And that is already a driver. And within the next years, it will be even bigger. So that is something that we should definitely have the focus on. And I think the other big potential of the digital industry is not only in the own scope, but really seeing the whole picture. So if I look at a company that maybe has only 100 employees and is doing, let's say, an application for meditation or music app, they might have 5 million listeners every day. And I think what we can do is really kind of spread the word and get these end customers also involved to take climate action as a digital approach. And the last one, and that is a bit towards also plan A, I think we, the digital industry, we need to build solutions that help other industries to solve the problems. And that is something that we also really focus on, that we want to help the best green tech companies to be more successful, because there are a lot of impact plays as well.
Indeed. And, you know, I mean, as leaders for climate action, I know that one of the things that you're doing really actively is about transforming the digital industry in terms of carbon climate neutrality. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Very important industry to, you know, take the forefront in this matter. And so it's really, I think there are many lessons to be learned from what you talked about. And hopefully you will be able to inspire other industries to take some of the steps that you've suggested. So thank you for that. Lubomila, you know, one of the things that I recall is that, again, Plan A had released a white paper quite recently on ESG reporting. So perhaps we talk a little bit about that as to how data-driven software solutions like yours can help businesses improve their ESG performance, because again, that comes up a lot, you know, in terms of specific actions that they can take, etc. So could you talk us through that a little bit?
Indeed, yeah. Well, environmental, social, and governance analysis and reporting can provide really valuable insights to help create this long-term value of stakeholders rather than shareholders only. They can significantly impact the financial metrics of a company, but it also allow the improved investment decision and also just management decision. With this in mind, and with the fact in mind that there is actually a lot of dispute at the moment on the topic, there's a lot of conflicting standards, there's a lot of different ways and questionnaires that are 30 and then 150 different frameworks like SASB, TCFD, EU taxonomy, CDP, CFDR, like I can continue listing all of those. We decided to straighten the facts and put together a white paper that explains this. And actually this came not single-handedly by itself, but together with a module on our platform that is solely dedicated to ESG reporting for financial institutions in particular, or for fast-scaling companies. What is particularly important at this stage is to really straighten kind of the understanding of why it matters to be looking into these metrics. Looking at diversity, looking at your carbon accounting, and then reporting on it allows you to be considered at the same level as others that are also doing the same thing. And with this in mind, like, we can start understanding how us as an industry, as a society, are maybe not so well performing on certain of these metrics. The second thing is that now there's enough evidence that shows that ESG is actually, you know, part of the agenda of the best performing companies. So those companies that are really taking this seriously, have been gathering data and looking at it and improving, are the ones that are also bringing better returns. So it's also like related to maybe the more understood and better understood financial return framework. And then the final one is similar to what Philippe was saying earlier in terms of engagement. I think that fighting climate change, addressing inequality, and kind of unifying maybe the understanding of ESG is altogether the work of a global society that is trying to improve. And what this means is that we need to all take our part in understanding how we are performing, how is this company, another company performing, for us to work together towards essentially seeing the change. And I think that a huge part to be played is, of course, employees, consumers, as well as the management of a company that would be looking at these metrics.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead, Philippe.
I can just agree with it. And I think we are in this very interesting time where we have really the possibility to move ESG, but also climate, out of the niche and make it a mass movement. So it's not special anymore if you have a strategy, but it's special if you don't have a strategy. And I think to enable this and not to leave it with just like people saying something, you need proper measurement tools that do exactly this.
Absolutely right. Yes, indeed. And you know, one of the points that Lubomila mentioned, and I think everyone in our wonderful audience today, you know, is committed to, is the fact that we have to think of what we can do now, and you know, perhaps organizational levels, of course, but also at the individual level. And that's something that when both of you, I know, are you know, very committed in that regard. And so perhaps a little bit of discussion on that aspect. You know, in the keynote, Chad spoke about various solutions that are available to all of us, etc. On an individual basis, what are some of the action steps that you think, you know, we can take, which often get ignored when we're talking about, when, you know, we're waiting for our governments and our organizations to take these steps? But what are some key action points that can still be taken? And simplistic as it might sound, unfortunately, it is still something that gets ignored. You know, to give you an example, at INSEAD, our students and our alumni started this community impact challenge, which is a very simple concept. It's about just getting people to sign up on an individual basis, and then of course getting sponsors and getting other people into it. Larger you know, groups can come in also, but the idea is just take a simple challenge and work on it as individuals. You know, for example, they picked up stopping the use of single-use plastic by me individually. So if I could ask you to talk through some instances of what you feel are some things that we really need to do as individuals to make a difference. Felipe, perhaps we start with you.
Yeah, and maybe I start with the easiest ones, and then I come to, I think, the hidden ones that have, in my eyes, the biggest potential, at least for some people in the tech industry. And I mean, again, you need to track your carbon. You need to understand where you are and where you are going. So I can just recommend to really look at your own personal carbon footprint. And then the three big pillars to really have a reduction normally is the topic of green energy to your house. It is the topic of reducing your travel, and making sure if you consume to support really green consumer products or really decrease the consumption. I think these are the very most important and easy to implement ones. And then I think looking at other topics, I mean, Bitcoin is like everyone has a Bitcoin, and also people have a lot of other cryptocurrencies. And I can just really say, like, if you own a lot of this and it's not a green coin, it can really so much drive your personal carbon footprint. And the weird thing is that it feels much better to not fly and to have green energy while having your money, let's say, at a normal bank and investing it into Bitcoin. And I think these are two things that I really want to tell everyone. Look at your bank, move your bank to a very honestly green bank like the Tomorrow Bank or many others out there, and make sure that you look at your currencies, your cryptocurrencies. So I think these are two hidden ones. And the other one that I also really encourage people to do is, where do you put your time? Because your time, and it's one of the most important resources, and if you can cut out time next to your normal job and put it into really solving problems in the climate space, for example, that has a huge potential. And if at one point you even decide to change your job and really focus into this, that's what we need. We need the best talent in this area. So that's, for me, the best personal action that you can do.
If I can add to this, I think it's quite important to follow these guidelines that Philippe mentioned. And if I can add to that, I see as quite impactful. One is related to this hidden, on average, 70% of emissions of people, and this is where we put our money. It's not only about the bank, but it's also the things you buy on a daily basis. We as consumers have a lot of impact, and this impact goes also in the hands of the companies we support, be it by buying fashion, be it by putting our money in investments, or by supporting the local farmer, or going into a certain supermarket and picking up a product that has traveled actually across the planet because it's out of season of where we live. So be mindful of how you spend your money, and know that each of the decisions you make and the companies you support with them is actually impacting the larger picture, which is related to the corporate sphere, related to the financial sphere, and ultimately is leading to, hopefully, the improvement, the betterment of the climate change fight. The second one that is kind of related to what Philippe was saying is related to picking where you spend your time, but I'll go even a step further, where I would say work for a company that is doing something on climate change. And that's not to say that they need to be actually building a company similar to Plan A or Leaders for Climate Action. No, there's plenty of phenomenal companies that are, producing physical products that have nothing to do with climate change, but are taking an active stance on the sustainability topic and have comprehensive ideas on how they can do that. And if you're not maybe yet ready to leave, or you still think that maybe there's a way for you to change the company, then get involved in shaping this strategy internally. We work with so many companies that actually have quite of a, I would say, grassroots approach to sustainability, where the green team shaped itself. They came to us and they pushed it through to the management. Management signed the budget, and then they're now using our platform. And that is essentially ultimately an equally as viable path as the one where the CEO decides to go that. So taking these two actions is actually a very tangible way of being involved and also contributing significantly to the reduction of emissions and the improvement of our environmental footprint as a society.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. So I completely agree. I think it's the hidden aspects that we need to pay attention to, as Philippe mentioned. And Lubomila, taking from what you spoke about, in terms of companies and what they're doing for sustainability and how that influences employees, whether they want to even join up or not. It's interesting. I was speaking with a large organization that does employer branding for some companies, and I was very, very pleased and heartened to hear them tell me that actually now their clients are actively telling them that when they plan their employer branding strategy, they do try and at least highlight the aspects that they focus on in terms of sustainability, and whatever the reasons, whether it's materialistic reasons or not, as long as it's happening, I think we'll take it, right? So that's really good, and good to hear you say that. I think I have time for one last question, and for this one, let's make it a broader question on a topic that may not be our most pleasant one, and may not be the one that we like the best, but the one that we have strong opinions on. And this is politics. So what role do you see politics as having, geopolitical situations, etc., on our move towards carbon neutrality and climate change? Felipe, would you like to start with that?
Yeah. I think for my side, the most important point is that we have a market failure, because simply the price of carbon, it's not really priced at the level where it is. And I think that is the role of politics, to really make sure at a good level to increase the carbon price, and that will help to accelerate all the changes. It will help to get rid of the old technologies much faster than the new technologies. And I think that really is the big role of politics. And I think the other one is that they have the budget and the possibility to support the right technologies. And that's the second one, to not only think just about reporting, but really look into the big potential that we have in the reduction field, and think about what are programs, how can we support to actually get it going, instead of just looking at the problem.
Maybe I can add an anecdote that I found quite shocking a few weeks ago, and it was about there was an ad of a bottle that was made from paper, and on the label it was saying this is a paper bottle, and then a few days later what came out was that under this bottle there was a plastic one. So what this kind of anecdote shows is actually the reliability or the face of sustainability today. If we're talking about sustainability from the perspective of where we were 2 years ago or 1 year ago, we've gone a long way. There's a lot that we learned. There's a lot more sophistication on the market about how we think about moving forward. The problem still is that we are not necessarily aligning around the definitions of the concepts. And this is where I think politics can play a big part, where they can find, a framework and a way where the greenwashing and all these opportunities for essentially undermining the progress that has been made is not only reported on, but it's something that is penalized and it's taken seriously. I think we need indeed press on carbon. We need indeed a lot more involvement with innovative projects and embedding them into the governmental, not only spending, but also implementation. And another thing we just need is very clear structure around greenwashing to make sure that really all these efforts that are being made is not just a marketing stunt.
Yeah, and maybe one other point that comes in my mind, and that actually that's something that is really a current thing that I personally worry about, and that I see the politics really having responsibility to do. I think if we have any other conflicts that are going on in regards of now, like the tension with China and the USA, but also the tensions between Russia and Europe, and many other things that are going in the wrong direction in the world right now. These are all things that are distracting us from solving the climate problem, because the climate crisis, we can only solve it together. And that is I look at the technology, I look at so many people working on the right things, and I think we can definitely achieve it. But we need to make sure to really have this as the core of our focus, and not let other problems become bigger. Because then the climate problem will be less important. We will not work together on it. There will be wars on economic level, and that's really the worst that can happen. And politics need to solve it with diplomats, with talking, and not with any kinds of business wars going on.
Absolutely. And I think that's the best place to end this discussion, to quote you, Felipe, to say that we can only solve this together, right? So as long as we understand that, then a lot of things will move forward faster. I want to thank you both for taking the time to be with us, for sharing some, practical, workable solutions for measuring, reporting, and reducing carbon footprint. I'm sure our audience has benefited from these inputs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we move now to the final session in this section on climate budget. So I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Ambroise Fayolle, who's the Vice President of the European Investment Bank. So Ambroise, you've been at the European Investment Bank in the capacity of Vice President since 2015. You're currently responsible for climate action and environment, development policy, and the European Fund for Strategic Investments. And to embarrass you a little bit more with all your achievements, I should share that you're a board member of the European Investment Fund. You previously worked at the French Treasury Department, IMF, and the World Bank. Thank you so much for taking time from what I know is a very busy schedule to be with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And it's because we have limited time and I have so much I want to ask you, I'm going to go straight into our first question. Now, of course, you are the Vice President of EIB. You've held many other important roles too before this. But what's most relevant to us in today's discussion is your role as being in charge of climate and environment portfolio at EIB. So to kick off this discussion, I'll be very interested in understanding a little bit about your personal motivations in terms of taking on this role. So what sort of motivated you to become the person who's in sort of the climate change champion and in charge of environmental sustainability?
Well, first, thanks for the invitation and thanks for the panel. I was very interested and I share many things that the panelists said, actually. I would say three things have motivated me. The first one is I come from the world of development more. I work quite a lot on developing countries at the IMF, at the World Bank, and at the Treasury as well, Paris Club, etc. What I saw first was that the continent that was mostly hit by climate change is Africa. And Africa is the continent that also contributes the least to climate change. So I think that was the first motivation for me. What can we do to try to bring, this is a global issue that we need to really try to cope with globally. The second thing that I found very interesting with climate was this is an issue that is extremely comprehensive. I mean, when you talk about climate, you talk, of course, about renewable energy. You talk, of course, about energy efficiency, but you talk a lot about innovation. And you need to add to this a lot of things that are related to being fair in the way you implement the strategy. This is really comprehensive. You need to include things that are related, and we did that at the EIB actually, in terms of being as inclusive as you can to make sure that the strategy will work for everybody. And so that's what I liked. And the last thing that I liked a lot is the fact that we are in Europe leaders in terms of climate change. We as EIB, we are the bank of the European Union. And we thought that would be a great opportunity for us to lead there the same way the European Commission and member states are leading with the Green Deal, basically. And the fact that we want to be the first continent to be climate neutral by 2050.
Thank you. And in fact, that leads me to the next question I had in mind, which was actually moving from the personal aspect to the professional one, to ask you about the fact that EIB does say that it's the climate bank for the EU. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? Where does that claim come from? How is it justified?
Well, the claim comes from that we are the Bank of the European Union. That is that is a fact. Actually, we are the financial arms of the European Union. Basically, we are a public bank, and our shareholders are the 27 member states of the European Union. So we, for the last 60 years, we have financed a lot of projects in Europe that have a European interest that is seen by our shareholders, basically in infrastructure, in innovation, in promoting SMEs, this kind of promoting innovation as well. We are transforming EIB, and this is a very, very ambitious and also interesting project. We are transforming EIB into the climate bank of the European Union. And by doing that, the shareholders have taken 3 decisions, basically, in 2019 and in 2020. The first one is to review the energy lending policy and to stop financing fossil fuel projects. The second one is a quantitative objective that was taken last year, which is to increase the share of what we have to finance in climate projects from 25% that we had to do before to 50% by 2025. And that is a big objective because we are a big institution. Now we finance around 60 billion euro projects every year. So moving from 25 to 50 means moving from 15 billion to 30 billion by 2025. So it's a big change. And the third objective of what we call the Climate Bank Roadmap is that we have decided that as of January 2021, so already today, all our projects have to be Paris aligned, so that we are sure that what we finance, we are not going to finance only green projects. There are a lot of other priorities in Europe. For example, we finance a lot of projects in the health sector. That is great, but this is not green. But what we need to make sure is that when we finance such projects, they are not going to go contrary to what we have as a general objective in terms of climate. In other words, there are things that we are not going to do anymore. There are projects that we are going to do more, then there are projects that we are going to do less. And if you want just one simple example, we have decided that we would stop financing new airports. And this kind of thing is going to be implemented. Defining the targets is very important, but if I may say so, this is the easy part.
That's wonderful. And as you said, some big, very important transformative changes, 50% by 2025 in terms of that reduction, huge, no new airports. And of course, we do understand the need to balance between providing support for investment on the one hand and the need to transform our economies in a sustainable manner on the other. So thank you for sharing that. Very interesting. Perhaps I can ask you now a little bit about what the bank does in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of measurement, how is it measured for yourself, monitoring, reporting, etc. And the fact that you've not really adopted a portfolio emissions target for yourself yet. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll say just a few words on that. Of course, we consider the effects of our projects on climate change. That for the climate bank, that is something that, but we already do that. We have specific emission targets for and what we call specific performance standards that have been decided for especially energy projects by the energy lending policy. And for example, what we have decided is that we would not finance projects if there are above 250 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, which means basically, for example, for gas projects, unless you have a strong component that is that includes green gas, or that includes green gas over it's measured over the period of time of the project. So if you will include more and more green gas in the project, then that can work. Otherwise, we are just not going to finance it. And more generally, what I would say is that we calculate, of course, the carbon footprint of our projects, and we calculate that in a way that measures both the absolute and the relative emissions. So we calculate the absolute emission, that is, how much does it imply in terms of greenhouse gas, but also we calculate the relative, which is compared with the alternative solution. That is something that we report in a public report every year. The last one was in 2019, but the next one will be pretty soon. And I think this is very important. It increases something that actually was said in the previous report, and that is for me key, which is we need to be more transparent. So transparency, the way also climate projects are becoming key for financial institutions in terms of risk and risk measurement. I mean, all these things mean that a lot of things are going to change in the near future. One word on why do we do that at the project level and not at the portfolio level. Actually, there are pros and cons, and I am not going to say that what we do is right and what others do is wrong. The truth is, we have the feeling that at the portfolio level, it can become somewhat counterproductive or perverse incentive. Let me just give you two examples. The first one is, let's assume this year we do 3 projects energy efficiency, and next year we'll do 0. I mean, this happens in banks. Does that mean that we have been less efficient last year than this year? No. You know that is something that you need to be cautious about. The same way with, does it translate, if you do that at a portfolio level, to shift from supporting the transition for example, high emitting sectors? That is probably what we have to do, especially as a public bank, which are the kind of research to do to improve, for example, the climate friendly research on steel or on cement, or these are key sectors for the future. Or and does it? I mean, I guess it would lead us to shift from that to sectors like renewable energy, or where probably we have less an added value than for high emitting. So that's why I say we prefer to do that at the project level, and that's what we have in the Climate Bank roadmap, a sort of sectoral decarbonization approach. So we do that by sectors.
Okay, and thank you for being very transparent on that and for sharing candidly. That's good to know. So if we can now perhaps talk a little more broadly about the financial sector. And now the European Commission, of course, unveiled its renewed sustainable finance strategy in 2020. So what do you think should be the main priorities in this area? And is there hope that the financial sector will then become a champion in terms of helping to reduce the impact on climate change?
Okay, let me tell you what I think. Um, what I think is one, the European strategy has a component that is absolutely essential, which is you need, if you want to make progress, you need to speak a common language. And that is the big value of two things that we are working on these days. The first one is what we call, in a horrible word, the taxonomy. The taxonomy means you speak the same language, and everybody. And if I take the example that Lubomila said in the last session, you cannot say, well, I think this is going to be green. Because I say it is green. No, it has to be, it is defined precisely. And the same for the other one that I wanted to mention, which is the standards for green bonds. You need to speak the same language. And that is going to help, I think, especially the financial industry, to make sure that they are aware of the rules, and that they are aware of what is green and not green, what does not significant harm, or what does significant harm to achieving the targets of the European Union. I think what is also important is that, and that is clear in the European strategy actually, is that we have what we call a just transition. And frankly speaking, in our board, that played a big role, because it is easier for countries in Western Europe that are less dependent on gas, for example, to say, okay, let's move with ambitious targets on the climate bank roadmap, than if you are in Eastern Europe, where you have an economy where you have to make more efforts to reach the targets. And the only way to reconcile everybody, and our strategy has been approved unanimously by all member states. The only way is to make sure that you are going to help more those who have more road to do. You need to be fair. And for that, it means financially you are going to help them more. But also, there was a debate on carbon footprint. For assessing our projects, we apply for example, for infrastructure, we apply an internal carbon price. The carbon price that we apply is consistent with the objective to reach the climate targets of the European Union and the climate neutrality, which means they are going, and I say that because it was a point by Philippe, it's going to increase significantly. Okay, we are now at something like 100 euros per ton. It's going to be 250 euros in 2030 and 800 euros in 2050. But in doing that, we have made sure of two things. First, we will review regularly this. We are not saying, this is it. Until 2050, we have decided everything and everything is set. We'll revise that and we'll review that. And if it needs to be changed, we'll change that. And the second thing is we need to be sure that if you do that, then there is no reason, for example, not to finance roads. Yeah. I mean, there are territories in Europe where you need to develop roads. And with the fact that you have more and more, and you see that, electric cars, I mean, the question of the emission of this kind of projects is completely different. So you need to apply that, I would say, very ambitious on the targets, but pragmatic on the way you implement it.
Wonderful. Some really important points that resonate strongly. Speak a common language, of course, the need to be fair and be ambitious, but pragmatic at the same time. So thank you so much for that. I wish we had more time, so much more to learn from you, but we have a very strict time limit for this session. So I just want to once again say a big thank you to you. And to wrap up this session for climate budget, I want to say, it's been really informative initiative to talk to all our very distinguished speakers today. And I think the fact that they've all been candid and open in their sharing, but most importantly, we found that everyone has spoken from their heart. They've spoken with passion. And that's possibly the most important thing. Even as we talk about measurement, recording, and finding effective solutions for reduction, I think this individual and collective human passion and determination is really what's going to ultimately safeguard our planet's future. So a big thank you to our audience for listening to us, and to all of our speakers for having been with us today, and upwards and onwards as far as climate change improvements are concerned. Thank you so much for being with us.